once we are talking about post-Soviet Tbilisi, we have to say what was Tbilisi in the end of the Soviet period. And actually, that was not very long ago, some 25 years ago only, or 23 years ago to be more precise. But the city was already quite large, especially from the viewpoint of Tbilisi settlements, Georgian settlement system. It kind of concentrated 1.26 million population. It was one of the largest in the Soviet Union, at least among top 10 cities by the population. And it concentrated almost 25% of the population of the country. Actually, it does the same today. Tbilisi is a dominant settlement in Georgia. But this is not the only thing how we can characterize it. First of all, the big dramatic growth of Tbilisi happened during the Soviet period. Before it was also not a small city, it was quite large, but it concentrated 200,000 people before Sovietization, and that was by far the largest city in the South Caucasus. But it grew sixfold during the Soviet period, and just in 50 years period, in 1974, it reached the margin of 1 million population. So it was very, very fast growth. Fast growth was because of urbanization process as such, because of industrialization, which happened in late 20s, 30s, then during the Second World War period, and so on. But then a lot of certain growth of urban services also pushed forward this population growth in Tbilisi, which happened mostly because of in-migration of rural population into the city. And of course, this process was translated in the territorial growth. The territory of Tbilisi was quite compact. In 19th century, it was compact city. In the beginning of 20th century, but already in the end of the Soviet period, it was huge. It had more than 360 square kilometers, out of which only 1/3 was urbanized. Urbanized, I mean, built up and had an appearance of the city. Actually, if we take today's Tbilisi, is almost the same. 500 square kilometers, and only 200 of them are urbanized. The territory is urbanized. All the rest is either open, let's say, spaces, woodland, and so on and so on, or village-like neighborhoods or settlements, former dacha places like Tsuneti or smaller settlements and so on. So this was very peculiar for the Soviet urban planning, because they would reserve a lot of land for the growth of the bigger cities, which were very important for them. And that was easy to do because the land was worth of nothing. There was no land market. The land was state ownership. Therefore, this urban sprawl, which we call, you know what is sprawl? When the cities are just growing irregularly. Yeah. This happened to Tbilisi, especially because of its topography. Please.
So these village-like areas in Tbilisi, were those there before the Sovietization of the city, or was that something that kind of came when people were coming from the regions into Tbilisi?
Both, actually, but mostly they were already before. So Tbilisi incorporated a lot of villages which had been allocated in the surrounding. Because Tbilisi was a kind of market center of this part of the region, and there were a lot of villages around, providing Tbilisi by food, by agricultural products, and so on. And in the process of this growth, of course, Tbilisi incorporated them legally, and then some of them they were reconstructed. But some of them they stayed like they are also today, by the way. So you can find the village. Okay, there are some new buildings, but the structure is almost the same. It's a typical village. It's nothing common with the big metropolis. This is how, and this is not peculiar, not only peculiar for Tbilisi, but this is not a very specialty or peculiarity. That happened in many large and not very large, that's medium-sized Soviet cities. Also happened like this because there was no constraint, no barrier to incorporate the rural areas. Why? Because the owner was this way or another the state, so they just decided and it happened. You understand what I'm talking about. So you're economists, you understand better than anyone else. So, and then this stretched linear form of the city caused insufficient connectivity between neighborhoods. I think it's clear to go from, because the length of the built-up area of Tbilisi is 40 kilometers. If you start from the Zahes or Avchala and then go to the southeast, let's say to the airport, or even farther away to Podichala and so on, which some Tbilisians, they don't know that there are such neighborhoods in the city at all, because they never go there if they don't live there. So this is bad functional also connections and so on. So this everything already was in place in the Soviet period, but of course some planning regularities which we are lacking very much today, they were more or better organized in the Soviet period because there were certain rules which were called rules and norms of construction, building rules and construction. SNIP it was in Russian, строительные нормы и правила. And the planning system worked much better than now. At least then after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And this is what we will be talking about. And what was the land use structure? This is very important because the Soviet cities, they were different from the European and American cities, from capitalist cities. Why? Again, because there was a resource which was not priced at all. So, for example, the industrial enterprises, they occupied huge amount of land, even in Tbilisi, which was not typical industrial city. Of course, we had a lot of industries, but Tbilisi never was as industrial as, for example, Moscow or Kiev. I don't talk about Donetsk or some Ekaterinburg in Ural and so on. That was more mixed city, rather more mixed city than industry. But look there. So 31%, almost one-third of the built-up area was occupied by residential, housing estates. And most of this housing, already in the end of the Soviet period, it was the Soviet time, multi-apartment blocks, like we know, mikrorayons or martowns or whatever you call here, yeah? Like Gldani, for example, Samurtalo, Mazisubani, and a lot of such kind of areas, quite uniform for the whole Soviet Union, because you could find the same type of areas in almost all cities around the Soviet Union. Then, and they occupied quite large areas. Then 17% and 17.5% for industry, which was huge amount of land, and of course not very intensively used. They were not necessarily in the central part of the city, but quite close from the center, especially if they have been established there during the early Soviet period. Take Didube, for example, or take Avlabari over there, and the surrounding areas, which are quite nicely allocated. Today you will find brownfields there in many places because the industrial plants are stopped, and there are huge territories with some ruins, I mean, like war stopped yesterday. Going there and so okay. But what is interesting, on the other hand, the service areas and central city functions and recreation areas inside the city, they occupied only few. The share of them was quite small, quite little. Tbilisi was not well verdurized. You know, verdurized means greened up of city during the Soviet period also. What is now, you know, and we are now actually recalling back positively the past times, because anyway there was more greenery than we have it now in the central part. But take the whole city. The whole city, 40% of the city in its boundaries is green, but nothing is inside the city. It's all outside. And one of the reasons, by the way, of this border extension was to change artificially the balance, which is quite stupid in my understanding, but okay.
Wait, so this is just for that metric of how much green space that was part of the reason for
you know, actually, what was added to Tbilisi, almost 80% there was green area, open spaces and woodlands and so on. So it really changed the balance dramatically. Okay, so then. But another interesting thing is that 20% was unused land. So there was a land inside the built-up area, but nobody would say for what it was. It was not developed, and that is a lot of space, by the way, and the space which then, during next 25 years, which we will be talking, was very, very intensively and so very often not very intelligently developed. But okay, that happened, that developed this way or another. Okay, so this was a picture, more or less. 1.2 million people, almost the same, a little bit more than we have it now, at the moment. So in the end of the Soviet period, Tbilisi was larger by the population than it is now. We're just reaching that margin because we lost almost 15% of our population during these out-migrations in the very beginning of 1990s. But what happened? What happened then to such kind of planned, uniform maybe, a little bit ugly outside the center, quite nice inside the center, Tbilisi, which had some own peculiarities, but also replicated a lot of features of the Soviet cities, right? What happened? In my understanding, there were three periods, three phases of transformation, of changes. What happened to Tbilisi, it's very difficult to say qualitatively, but we know that it changed a lot. So how it changed? What is absolutely clear, and everyone says that planning as such, after the Soviet period, and spatial planning of territorial planning, they have undergone a big crisis, and they are still in crisis, if you ask me, because planning was something bad in understanding of many people who have lived and passed this Soviet period, because planning was something stupid. That was such an association. Planning is bad, planning is stupid, and of course it should be somehow erased, somehow eliminated from our everyday. The market will decide for everything. So very liberal approach. And of course urban development was and still is under crisis. The second thing is that of planning as a tool of spatial growth. During many years, Tbilisi grew just according to some interest, some kind of informal balances of power, of capital, of influences, and so on. And the third thing is imbalanced urban development, which happened and which was and is still observed between the larger population groups or stakeholders, let's say, stakeholder groups. If we take citizens, if we take business sectors, developers, and government, there, in my understanding, and I will try to prove it, their interests and they never coincide. And this is, in my understanding, natural that they don't coincide very often, but there was no mechanism to balance them according to the public need, which is absolutely evident, obvious, in my understanding, when looking to the city and when watching what kind of things are developed and are going on. So the first phase then was early transition phase in the beginning of 1990s, which I call, it was do-it-yourself approach, do-it-yourself urbanism. In Georgian it would be "Tvilshebok mededa," "Zelay sam," okay, in Russian. So that was a period when the people did whatever they wanted, or whatever not they wanted, but most probably whatever they could do. Why? Because first of all, there was a political instability, there was just a fear, no security, personal security, economic security, and so on. Economic decline, there was no money in the country, and some of you maybe very, very briefly remember it, but I remember quite well. Poor and corrupt governance, actually no institutions, nothing, you could buy anything. For some bribe, yeah, you could build the hut in the Freedom Square, which was Lenin Square. Okay, after the Soviet time, it was not anymore. Freedom Square. Okay. Deficiency of institutional setup and legal framework, okay, this is clear, including lack of master plan, ignorance of regulatory norms. Now, about the master plan, about the building regulations. They were in place and they were not. It depends what the stakeholders, especially the influential stakeholders, wanted. The master plan, the last master plan in the Soviet period, there were three of them. The last master plan was elaborated and implemented since 1970, 1972. So its period was up to year 2000. But of course, when this socio-economic situation changed completely, the master plan was not any more relevant. Actually, it was obsolete already in the 1980s. And this is important because sometimes when, for example, the government wanted to approve some projects, they said that, okay, we can approve because it is written in the old master plan and we don't have new one. And sometimes if they wanted to reject, they said, okay, how we can approve it? Well, this is the master plan from the Soviet Union, which is doesn't exist now. So that was quite comfortable for the government, for certain stakeholders, not to have master plan at all. And that was delayed and delayed and delayed. And the new master plan was adopted only in 2009. But this is another story. What happened after the adoption of that master plan, please?
What did the Soviet master plan look like? Because if you look at any proper Western city, you will see either a circle. If you look at from the Google map of the districts, you will see either circles or quarters, some geometric structure.
Okay.
When you look at the Tbilisi, you see the mess. So
not exactly. I will tell you. Actually, yes. Tbilisi must be messy because this is a peculiarity of Tbilisi. If Tbilisi wouldn't be messy, it wouldn't be Tbilisi. But what kind of? In my mind, I tell to my colleagues very often that the whole flavor of Tbilisi is that nothing stands straight, everything is twisted. And the best quintessence of Tbilisi is this tower, in the old city, which is very eclectic and nothing, and with some
Gabriadze.
Yeah, and this is Tbilisi really. But what we are doing now, we have done during the last years, and not only last years, but also in the Soviet period, is too much. It is not anymore nice. And what you say, there are two factors. Actually, Tbilisi couldn't be a rounded city because the topography. It is in the valley, and this valley does not give you possibility to develop it as a circle or as some regular form. But on the other hand, of course, this stretching along the river so badly, I would say. This is something else, If Tbilisi was a capitalist city, there would be in this territory not one city, but three at least. Because Gdani and this northern part is not a part of Tbilisi. Tbilisi proper, let's say.
I mean, if you look only at Gdani or only at Didigomi or only at Tbilisi, you don't really see the quarters there. You see the buildings that are messed up inside.
Yeah, now it is like this. But during the planning, they would just. I would recommend to just go to the YouTube, and there is Planeta Gldani, such yes, Planeta Gldani, very nice documentary done by Georgian Sergei Gvarjaladze. It was done 5 or 6 years ago or 4 years ago about social problems and how the people live there. But there is a part about development, and you will see very clear picture, very clear planning, and how it was developed in the beginning. What happened then, I'm going to tell you now, because this is what I call do-it-yourself urbanism, because when the people just do whatever they can do, and how they decide, yeah? Okay, it is absolutely true, and partially it is true, but of course they were ugly from the very beginning. The concept itself was, in my understanding, incorrect. But okay, and now we can't change it, unfortunately. But another thing is really that some of the materials, building materials, were stolen and sent aside. And many dachas which are around and private houses which are around Tbilisi, they've been constructed by that material which was taken away from and sold or just given to someone from these micro-rayon buildings. And this was not only Tbilisi, that was the entire Soviet Union, but more in the southern republics and less in the northern. Of course, in the Baltic states, the building quality was the best. Then in Slavic countries, it was not good, but more or less acceptable. In the Caucasus, it was really bad. But if you would go to the Central Asia, that was really disaster. Because what I've seen in Almaty when I was a student, I really believed that Tbilisi is a paradise place, even in the micro-rayons. Okay, so this way or that. So, this was a kind of context in which all this development happened. And this development was very local, very small scale, thanks God, because the people couldn't afford building of a big buildings, constructions. They just concentrated on so-called improvement of their own livelihood, their own housing space. And what did we get? Apartment building extensions to multi-story apartment blocks, which are, in my interpretation, vertical slums. So usually the slums are horizontal, we have them vertical. So you can watch and observe it directly. You don't have to go somewhere. You see it. Infills. What is infill? These small things put here and there, mostly small, because there was vacant places, not maintained places, and they just grab and put there some smaller constructions like kiosks or small garages and so on. And occupation of so-called no one's land. I was working during 2 years in the city hall as a head of land department. That was 1993 and 1994. That was a very, very interesting, terrible but very interesting period. Every day I would get a lot of applications. But, okay, I found no one's land there. I cleaned it up. That was really very dirty and so on, which was correct. I cleaned it up, and please give me a right to build there a small hut in the center, somewhere in the center of the city, or close from the center. They wanted to build a hut there. And actually, of course, they didn't get permission, but they did it because there was no control mechanisms to put. And then, of course, a lot of corruption, as I said. So, occupation of no one's land was a way of densification of the building densification, which we are observing even now. Okay, today it is not anymore no one's land. They pay for it, but this kind of inertia still runs, because you see that there is no space, and they still anyway. The developers are building there something.
But now they have like ownership rights somehow codified, and so like that is now their property, or
that time or now.
Now. So like
No, now it is, especially in Tbilisi, each square meter, I think, is under someone. Maybe they are not present or something, but as soon as you touch something, you will get a kind of someone coming up and telling that it is, and maybe also with the registration documents. Yeah. Because Tbilisi is a special case of big cities, because the properties and the land is quite expensive now, and of course the land market is working. But in 1990s there was nothing, so there was just a decision, and who would overpower whom. That was the whole thing. So this is, I took this picture in Diromi district, and that was already mid of 2000s. With the students we did some small research about these extensions, and we made interviews with 105 families just to understand who is doing it or who has done it. And so the bad thing is that actually this is illegal what they are doing, but most of the big building extensions, they are legal or quasi-legal. Why? Because the last communist government in the Soviet time, after 9th of April, this tragic events, they issued a decree which allowed officially the population, the citizens, and that was also under the umbrella of the old Soviet, let's say, approach, to participate in the extension of their own building spaces, because they recognized that the building spaces which they had was per capita was ridiculous. It didn't meet any requirements, and therefore they made this step. But that was, of course, envisaged to be done under certain planning, under certain rules, by some qualified companies and so on. But in 2 years' time, the communist government was kicked off. The state building companies, they just disappeared and have been converted or transformed into the private companies only after a few years' time. So that there was a decree and there was no one to control. So what the people, I also remember quite well, because I lived in Diromi district in this Khrushchevka, and I remember quite well when my neighbors, they came up to my father and they said that okay, now we are starting doing this extension, and we need also your signature. We said that we don't want to do it. No, it is not possible because everyone should. And we started, and then in the end we got that we finished it somehow, but the neighbors above us and beneath us, they didn't. So that was a kind of very, very dangerous place actually to live and to go there, because that was very unhealthy. And then, not because of this, but in the end we exchanged the building and went somewhere else. But many people are still living in such conditions. Right? So this one or another one. This is in the very center of the city. You know which street it is? But it is not a facade, of course. It is a backyard. Yeah, it is a Peking Street.
It's like they're growing themselves.
Isn't it a masterpiece? Look. So the people did in the way and with the materials which just nobody could dream. So some of them are finished, some of them are not finished, and so. And this is the at least 40% of the high rises today in Tbilisi. This is an environment where we live. These very proud Georgians that we say, okay, of course we have a very, very old culture. Of course we have. We know how to adapt living conditions in the high rises. And another thing. In some places, this is the Romi district, they didn't finish it. Most probably the people didn't have enough money, thanks God. And you have these frames only. And these are garages and infills about which we talk. Another one, you see. But this is very nice. Look at all. This is not Photoshop.
No, this is the Romi, right?
It is the Romi. It is the Romi, and you know, I observed a couple of cases like this, and I would explain why. Because in 1990s, there was really dangerous to leave anything outside. There were people running with machine guns, and they could easily take it. There was no money for, even if the situation was good, there was no money and no petrol at all. I don't know whether you remember these stories about Canistra. The Canistra was the most key word, because Canistra is a plastic or metal container where you would put petrol, 20 gasoline, 20 liters, and that was very important, especially if you had gas from abroad. And when some delegations came, even the ministries would use them. Yeah, and canistra was always in the vocabulary. So.
Is there a car sitting up there?
Yes, this is what I showed. Yeah.
How did they get it?
Okay, this is easy. So by the crane.
All right.
By the crane you can put it. It's better to. It was better to pay $100 to the crane and to secure it like this than to leave it down in the. So this is what we have got. And this is a product. This is a placemaking. What the urbanists say. It is a placemaking. And this placemaking was blessed by the government and done by the population. It is what we create, not someone else. What were the outcomes of this first phase then? Dramatic reduction of public and commonly used spaces. Okay? Because these infills and these extensions, they of course occupied the collective or common spaces. Territorial and building safety deterioration, I think that you understand, I gave you one example. Problems with legislation and acquisitions and, these acquisitions which they would do, especially when there was no one left, it was always problematic and still is problematic too. Many of them they had to give them back unless they constructed there something. When it is constructed, it is of course much more difficult to kind of demolish it or to take it back. And substitution of population mobility by in situ improvements. So they make usually how it is in the cities. If you don't like the area or the living conditions, you sell it and move to another place. In case of Tbilisi, it was done on the spot, right? We just extended our living spaces, so on, and now we're happy. If, for example, there was a family with 2 children, now those children they married, they just made the extension, and some of those extensions are bigger, larger than the body space. Go to the Saburtalo Street. You see there the frame of 4-story building, and on top of it, you will find a huge 12 or 14-story. I don't know which kind of enforcements they put there, but you know, this is a earthquake-prone zone, Georgia, Tbilisi also. So, and there was also exhibition, kamikaze loggias. So this is true, but not only loggias are kamikaze, we are also kamikaze, I think, all of us, living in such conditions. And taking also provided that already in the Soviet period, the quality of those buildings, they were not perfect. Okay, then since late 1990s, the beginning of 2000s, the new phase started. And that was, I call it investor urbanism. So investors came out with some money and they started to buy, to develop, and so on. And also the taste of the population changed. They got some money from where, you should know it better than me, but they started to buy different products, housing. So there was economic growth, increasing demand of the population, of living commercial spaces, appearance of foreign investors, non-existence, and still, this is important. But the plan was not in place again. Therefore, this messy, but now not do it yourself, but investor urbanism started. You see? So here are some forms, how it developed, and so on. I will just show one example. So you see, when you overlook this part of the city from the Turtle Lake, so this is Ipshidze Street and surroundings, where I never go, by car especially. So that was it was the edge of the city in 1990s, in 1970s, some more development, in 1990s more development, and in the beginning of 2000s, we got really terrible densification of the area by finished or non-finished buildings, and the built ratio of the built space came up to 60 or 70%. According to the classical models of morphogenesis of morphogenetical development, morphological development of the capitalist cities, which was done for the industrial cities in England, there are 4 phases. So first is institutive phase, when the building starts and it is very thin. Then repletive phase, when this densification happens. Then you have climax phase, when everything is kind of filled up by the buildings, and what you can do after only just demolish it and start recessive phase. Now, in many places, especially Vaque, Vera, this Saburtalo also, we are very close, or we already achieved this climax phase. You can't go there. You can't move there, especially by car. If you go to this triangle between, which is between Heroes Square Philharmonia and the university. You can't move even on foot. To go from one building to another where my friends are living, I have to make a big lap. If you don't know where to squeeze through and go, because there is no plan. Buildings are really put on top of each other and next to each other. So this is what happened. And this, of course, spoiled a lot, in my understanding, in understanding of many also experts, the environment, the urban environment of many nice places, like Vera, like, for example, Paliashvili Street, that is not that dangerous and not that bad, let's say, as Lipshidze, but still, you have Goldanization everywhere. Yeah? This. But it is explainable from market point of view. The people are buying those spaces, and the developers, they just go and grab and build and build as high as it is possible, as dense as it is possible, because each square meter is a profit. Yeah, they have to cover their costs because the density of the population was quite high.
Something I observed only in Georgia is the inverted pyramid shape of buildings.
Yes, like
this, yeah. They get
so
wider.
This is part of the development of Manhattanization, you know. We are very creative, so they did it like straight, and we're doing that. Yeah, and another thing, just ruining the urban landscapes, or valuable urban landscapes. When we are talking about Paliashvili, this does not exist anymore, thanks God.
Ah, okay.
This is an American village which was then removed to the American, to this highway, yes. But before it was constructed there. And it did not happen because it did not fit, let's say, in the old part of the city. Because there was a claim about the land ownership.
Oh.
And they had to remove it and to take it and put in some other place. Of course, I understand this is not the worst thing you can see in Tbilisi, but again, you see, the old part and then all of a sudden absolutely unexpected new structures. All this. This is typical. This one, you know where it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is close to the sports palace, and the municipality kind of takes it as a finished structure, because the people are already living there. And this is just next to the city hall. Okay, so this way or another, I wouldn't say that one phase is completely finished and another phase started, but this is a prevalence of one of those things, what I'm talking. And then since 2006, 2007, second half of 2000s, there was another wave, which is finished now, but how it will be continued, we don't know. Because now it is a standby, which is sometimes good for the city like Tbilisi is. It is politicized or politically determined urbanism. I even don't know how to call it more nicely. When the people in the government, the small kind of stakeholder group, politicians, they understood that city development is a good asset for attracting, first of all, investments, attention of the population, votes from the population, and so on. And they started fast renovation or reconstruction of the city spaces, not only in Tbilisi, in some other cities, but only in selected parts, and making the most visible projects, the most shiny projects, not asking whether spending money on this or that project is efficient or not. No economics beyond it, beside it, no expertise, architectural and urban planning expertise behind. Fast development, which is actually also not an achievement, let's say, or invention of Georgia. This happens, look Baku. Baku is a classical paradise for such kind of development. So you ask, you never know who decided, where it is kind of prescriptive, such kind of development. But you go and you see new buildings, they look quite similar to each other, and they just replace, in some cases, quite interesting old neighborhoods. This is really heartbreaking, in my understanding. So, what was the faster economic growth, strong government and political intervention and development, and this is consolidated now stakeholder. I mean, very strongly consolidated governmental group who decided for such development. And what kind of examples do we have? Now, this is interesting. That was on the eve of one of the elections. And they put on the parliament all these banners with some constructions. And most of these constructions, they had nothing to do with the government. They were private projects. But they put it, because they, by this they emphasized how constructive, how innovative they are, how they are going to change Georgia to the modern new state. This, which is very contradictional, but I like it personally. For me now it is a landmark, but not the things which are around it. But this is very personal, you know. Not the quality here is important so much, but the approach. We are talking about processes, we are talking about approaches. Because, of course, when you build, sometimes you build it nicely, sometimes wrongly, but for what? Who blesses you during this development? This is very important.
And just a point about this real quick. I think it's really interesting that once you get off this bridge, you're going over to this street with all the bars and restaurants. So you have a multi-million-dollar bridge, or multi-million-dollar bridge right there. But then in between the bridge and this bar street, there's no real sidewalk or anything. So like there's no continuity between these two.
That's true. That's true. That this is also one of the, so this bridge at least made it possible to approach the river. If you want to jump there, you can go and jump. Otherwise, you will be killed by the car. Yeah, in other places. And that was also one of the peculiarities, one of the symbolic things of the Soviet development, because the river was considered as a collector of the waste, nothing else. Industrial, residential waste, and so on. And of course, now to revive this and to make this riverside development is quite difficult, because you can't cut those embankments and those traffic anymore. So how to do it? It's really a problem. But good is that now on agenda, at least they mentioned that this is important thing. Maybe not in the center anymore, but in the outskirts where you have these brownfields. But I'm afraid that they will replace those brownfields with these high-rise and other residential buildings, like they did it already are doing it in Dirsichala. Absolutely. I want to emphasize again one thing. I understand that in the Soviet period, the space per capita, per inhabitant housing, I mean, was really very little. But after that, the population did not grow, and a lot of new square meters, millions of square meters of new space emerged. So why it is not enough? Who buys? And the questions like this. Of course, we try to investigate certain things, and because the students asked me, I said, okay, just go and study how it is. And then we made small plan, and they went, and quite interesting results. But they contradict again what, for example, the realtors, the agents say, and so on. Because I have a feeling that the non-occupancy rate in Tbilisi new building estates is quite high. Not as high as in Yerevan or in Baku, but quite high also here. Okay, this is some other thing. I can't now prove it, but yeah. And this is renovation of old city. Actually, I also like it. I like more renovated than non-renovated. But when you listen to the experts, when you listen to the heritage protectors, and so they say that was a disaster. Again, I don't know, but such kind of discussions, they must happen beforehand, not afterwards. And that was non-participation of the population, not only of the population, of specialists. Yeah, this is also a nice picture. Former Plejano, I was studying in this area, in 24th secondary school. I know it quite well. It's nice, but again, what is the cost efficiency? This is a question, and nobody knows about it. Of course, nobody could be against renovations, but maybe there were better ways. But nobody tried it. It is done like it is. And some of the buildings now, they must be renovated again because it was quite cheap.
I interviewed Aversi, the manager of Aversi, which is a major...
Aversi.
Yeah, and they have a building on the street. So what he told me, in fact, is that they were forced to pay for the renovation, and not only that, they also had to work with a particular company. So the renovation had to be done by a particular developer.
Yeah, if the people were forced to...
won the tender.
If the companies were forced to buy the grapes, for example, and make their own wine, why they wouldn't be forced? So this is an overall, this is a systematic thing, of course. I'm not against to force someone, but not in this way. There must be motivation, not forcing. And this one, okay, this is for foreigners, of course, when they don't know, we show them. So this kind of development, which is necessary, I understand, for the society, for the development. But again, we are talking about alternatives. Also, this politicized approach to the city development, I argue, at least, that it was a little bit directed towards changing the existing values, existing landmarks, existing even central places in the city. So this is a traditional after the Russian Empire, after 1801. From here we have this main square of the city and the main main avenue, the main axis. Yeah? They started to move it a little bit to the other part of the city.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually there was also one project, if you remember. There is this one, is Arsenali place, yeah, where they wanted to construct in the beginning before Kakakaladze bought this area, the ministry complex and so on. So then they could make a big, really. Official, I mean, formal, governmental, or whatever district, just replacing the balances from the old city center to the new city. Okay, this you know, I won't. And how I prove it also, justify my suggestion. When the new power comes in the force, they always try to change, to shift the stresses from the old parts of the city to the new. For example, when Russians came, they just left behind, they just turned back to the old part of the city, which was ruined, which was old, which was not friendly, maybe not understandable for them. They started to build a new city. When communists came, They didn't of course completely ignore the old part of the city, but they started their privileged regions to start, and that was Vaken. Not Vera, not Rustaveli, not old parts of the city where residences or places for Soviet elite, but Vaken, the places which they have constructed. And to make some conclusions now. Yeah? First conclusion is that in Tbilisi so far, during last at least 1 century, planning and market, they didn't work together. They didn't work into combination. Either we had one or we had another, but not together. And for development of a good city, we need both. Why? Because market will never consider public interests. This is not a market goal. The target of market. Because the public interest could be only established, implemented by intelligent, good planning. But planning without market will never decide where to do what and how to develop, because it is very artificial. This is beyond the kind of socio-economic regularities of development. Right? The second thing is that imbalanced urban process was observed all the time. Lack of consensus and systematic conflict between stakeholders. And I tried to illustrate that. So always someone was so dominant that the others could not even participate. And that is a big problem. Because if the city does not, as well as the society, as well as economy and so on, does not accept and ignore the consensus between the stakeholders, it will always be a problem. The next will come and they will say, okay, we're now ruining everything, we're starting from the very beginning. And the third thing is distorted role transformation in planning and urban development. Here I'm making reference to the social theories. Maybe there is a social theorist, Niklas Luhmann, who says about the development and self-development of social systems. And here we observed a lot of twists. The population acted like architects, the government acted like planners, the planners acted like developers, the developers acted like politicians, and so on. This is what we are having also today. And this is a killing thing for the society. Because if you study here economy and someone else will do economy and you will go to perform the performances in the circus or in theater, then this is not a right way of societal development. Because the city is nothing else. It is not only the buildings. This is the easiest thing to change, in my understanding. But to change this mentality and this interaction of the people, this is very difficult. And our culture, unfortunately, so far does not prove that we are urban nation. And if you are not urban nation, you are not living in a good cities. So thank you very much, and I'm really very sorry I abused.
Just on time.
Really?
Yeah.
Good, thank you.